There is a very specific, almost automatic reflex that kicks in whenever we see a woman crying about a relationship. You see it in bathroom stalls, you hear it over brunch, and you feel it when your best friend calls you in tears. The immediate, collective assumption. It's never about the complexity of human connection. It's simply, what did he do? I experienced this firsthand recently. My relationship ended on a random Tuesday night, actually, and the hardest pill to swallow wasn't just the heartbreak, but the bruised ego of realizing he was the one who wanted to leave. When I finally confessed this to the women around me, their reaction was instantaneous. They rallied like a protective army. Even the ones who knew he was a decent, hardworking man, they immediately began rewriting history to fit the narrative. They assured me I was too smart, too beautiful, too strong, and that he must have been intimidated or greedy or, suffering from some hidden commitment issue. They offered me this unconditional validation, projecting their own past traumas onto my situation to convince me that I was faultless. But amidst that whole chorus of support, I had this sinking, really uncomfortable realization. While they were busy painting him as the villain, I looked in the mirror and I realized I wasn't exactly a field of roses either. I remembered the unnecessary outbursts, the insecurity I masked as keeping him on his toes, and the emotional games I played because I was just terrified of losing him. And the tragic irony was that while everyone else was asking what he did wrong, I was left staring at the undeniable proof of my own toxicity. It made me wonder, why is it that when the fairy tale ends, we are so quick to blame the other person, but so terrified to admit that sometimes the red flag was actually us? That opening confession, which is intensely personal, it really sets the mission for this deep dive. We're calling it the accountability mirror. Confronting the red flag was me. We're really trying to move past the comfortable narratives, the easy blame game, to understand how relationships truly fail. Our mission is to understand relationship collapse not as like a unilateral act of sabotage, but as a systemic, complicated, and unpredictable failure that inherently involves the actions of both partners, even when only one person is the one who walks out the door. We have to look at the science to understand what goes wrong in the system.
That framing is so essential. It really is.
Yeah.
Because your experience, it just highlights the gap between our cultural reflexes and the scientific reality. That immediate, what did he do reflex is so prevalent. But when researchers actually observe couples in a lab setting, studying conflict using, empirical observational methods, they find a very different starting point. Women are actually the partners who typically initiate most of the conflict discussions.
Okay, that is a fascinating piece of data right out of the gate. But I want to pause there because just stating that women initiate conflict can so quickly lead to an unfair conclusion, right? It sounds like we're just shifting the blame from him to her.
And that's exactly the critical nuance we need to emphasize. You're right. The research itself cautions against that interpretation. We know that in distressed marriages, there is a very common, highly observed pattern. It's called the wife demand, husband withdraw pattern.
Okay, wife demand, husband withdraw.
Exactly. The wife brings up the issue, often demanding change or engagement, and the husband, he pulls back. He stonewalls or gets defensive. So if you combine the fact that women are often the ones initiating with this specific demand-withdraw dynamic, well, you might wrongly conclude that women are the cause of the marital distress.
Which is the trap.
It's the trap. But the science is crystal clear. This pattern has to be viewed as systemic. The withdrawal is a reaction to the demand. And the demand is often a reaction to a long-term feeling of neglect or lack of connection. You can't just pull one action out and assign unilateral blame. Both behaviors are deeply interdependent.
So if we look at the whole system, what are the actual mechanisms of conflict resolution that fundamentally predict failure? What does that structure of dysfunction look like?
Well, the structure is pretty much set the moment the conversation starts. One major longitudinal study found that the way a conflict discussion begins, it determines its entire subsequent course in a staggering 96% of cases.
96%. That's almost deterministic. If you start negative, you're going to end negative.
You're almost guaranteed to. So to understand relationship instability, and really that cascade toward divorce, we look at the most devastating and predictive patterns. Researchers famously dub them the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
The 4 horsemen. Okay, let's really drill down into these. These aren't just, bad habits. These are predictors of relationship death. What's the first one, and how is it different from just a simple argument?
The first one is criticism. And it's so crucial to understand this distinction. A complaint addresses a specific behavior.
Okay.
For example, I am upset that you didn't call me when you said you would. That's a complaint. Criticism, however, is a complaint with added blaming and a global generalization. It attacks the partner's character, their personality.
So it's personal.
It's deeply personal. It sounds like, you are so selfish, you always put your friends first, and you never consider my feelings. The difference is the use of those sweeping global terms, you never, you always, which leave the partner feeling attacked, not held accountable for one specific thing.
Right. That moves the issue from we have a problem to solve to you are the problem. What comes after that character attack?
The most natural defense mechanism in the world, which is the second horseman. Defensiveness.
Of course.
When you feel personally attacked, you're not going to listen. You're going to deny responsibility for the problem. Defensiveness can manifest as, righteous indignation or yes-butting or most commonly, cross-complaining.
Cross-complaining.
Yeah. Instead of addressing the initial criticism, you respond by turning the complaint right back on your partner. So they say, you never call. And you say, well, I didn't call because you never listened to me anyway.
Oh.
It's a way of saying, the problem isn't me, it's you. And it just completely prevents any form of resolution.
And the third one, this is the one I always hear is the most venomous. Contempt.
Contempt is the single greatest predictor of divorce. It is relational poison. It goes way beyond simple anger. It's expressing disgust and disdain. It includes insults, name-calling, demeaning your partner, or taking the high moral ground, treating your partner as if they're beneath you.
It's not just verbal, is it?
No, in fact, it's often nonverbal. The research noted that specific facial cues, like that unilateral raising of the lip corner, that sneer, or a classic eye roll, those are physical manifestations of contempt.
The eye roll?
The eye roll. When you look at your partner with utter disregard, you're communicating that you don't respect them. And that message fundamentally corrodes the emotional bond. There's almost no coming back from it.
I can just imagine that when contempt enters the room, the conversation is effectively over. And that leads to the last horseman, doesn't it?
Exactly. The final one is stonewalling. This is withdrawing, emotionally or physically. The person feels so flooded by all the negativity, the criticism, the defensiveness, the contempt, that they physically just shut down.
They can't take it anymore.
They can't. They become unresponsive, they stop making eye contact, maybe they leave the room, or they simply refuse to engage at all. It's often a physiological response to overwhelming stress. It's a way the body tries to self-soothe and just escape.
But it leaves the other person feeling totally abandoned.
Completely. Stonewalling essentially guarantees that the conflict will remain unresolved and will inevitably resurface, probably worse than before.
So we have these 4 incredibly destructive behaviors. If we're aiming for a stable relationship, what does a healthy couple do during a conflict? I heard you mention there's math involved.
There is math, and the math of stability is truly instructive. Researchers found that stable, happy marriages showed a 5.1 ratio of positive to negative interactions during conflict resolution.
5 to 1.
5 positive interactions for every 1 negative interaction, and this is during a fight.
That's incredible. What counts as a positive interaction in the middle of an argument?
It could be a genuine laugh, a touch of affection on the arm, an expression of validation like, I understand why you feel that way. Humor, interest, empathy. Anything that repairs the momentary tear.
And the unstable couples.
The unstable marriages, the ones heading toward a divorce, they operated at a ratio of 0.8.1.
So less than 1 positive for every negative. They're in a deficit.
A constant deficit. They were living in an emotional overdraft.
That's a perfect analogy for the listener. It's like an emotional bank account. If I make a withdrawal, a criticism, I need to make 5 deposits immediately just to keep the relationship solvent and in the black.
Precisely.
A 0.8.1 relationship is it's bankrupt.
It's bankrupt. You are constantly overdrafting the emotional connection. The positive deposits are essential because they repair the damage in real time. The negative interaction is unavoidable. I mean, all couples fight. But the positive interactions are the lubrication that allows the system to keep functioning.
Okay, that tells us what happens during a fight. But here's the really profound insight from the research that I think is so important. The real problem often begins far, far before the argument ever starts. We need to talk about the role of non-conflict interaction.
This is where the systems theory really comes into play and just blows the whole thing wide open. The study design was incredibly rigorous. They had couples engage in a completely neutral conversation first, the events of the day reunion discussion.
So just catching up after work.
Yeah, just talking about what happened after being apart for at least 8 hours. Then, after that, they moved on to discussing a chronic problem area in their relationship.
So you're telling me that the boring, mundane, how was your day, honey, conversation actually held the key to predicting marital success or failure later on.
Absolutely, 100%. The core finding was that dysfunctional conflict patterns, like that high level of negative emotion, the appearance of the four horsemen during the argument, were predicted by interaction variables from both the husband and the wife.
Both of them.
During that preceding non-conflict interaction, marriage is unequivocally a system with bidirectional influence that crosses contexts.
Yeah.
What happens at dinner dictates what happens during the problem-solving meeting later.
That seems impossibly sensitive. Wait, so you're saying if I'm just slightly checked out or stressed about traffic while my partner's talking about the day, I'm already pre-programming them to be angrier or more defensive later? That seems almost impossibly fragile.
It is sensitive, but think of it as setting the emotional thermostat for the house. The sources give these really clear examples. If the husband displayed anger or specific fear and tension cues, like, a tight jaw, clipped speech, during the neutral events of the day chat, that predicted the wife's subsequent anger or fear and tension during the conflict discussion later on.
Wow.
His subtle emotional withdrawal or his anxiety during a safe, non-stressful discussion contaminated the emotional well they had to draw from later when real conflict was required.
It's almost like emotional residue. You're carrying it from one conversation to the next.
That's a great way to put it. It is. And furthermore, that famous wife-demand, husband-withdraw pattern during conflict. It wasn't predicted by who was right or wrong in the argument. It was predicted by a specific deficit in positive affect. So, less interest, less validation, less humor or affection from both spouses during the preceding events of the day discussion.
So if they're both failing to connect positively in the mundane moments,
the emotional capital is depleted, the bank account is empty, and the system defaults to the demand-withdraw pattern when it's put under stress.
this completely shifts the accountability, doesn't it? It's not just about who threw the first piece of criticism in the fight. It's about who failed to connect when things were peaceful. And this brings us squarely to the turning toward or turning away framework.
This is the practical application of that finding. It's so powerful. Relationships are built in small currency. Thousands of small, everyday bids for connection.
What's a bid exactly? It sounds so formal.
It's not formal at all. A bid can be anything. It's seeking interest, humor, affection, or excitement from your partner. It could be pointing out a funny dog across the street, or asking for help with a task, or sharing an exciting piece of news from work. It's any attempt to connect.
And the stability of the entire relationship depends on the partner's response to these tiny little bids.
Yes. The crucial dynamic is whether that bid is requited, meaning the partner turns toward the bid. They reciprocate with appropriate positive or negative affect. They validate their partner's presence.
Or unrequited.
Or unrequited, turning away. That means ignoring the bid completely, or meeting it with clear negative affect, like annoyance or obvious disinterest.
I remember the example from the source material where the wife is excitedly reporting on their young son examining a flower for 30 minutes, and she's met with her husband's just obvious disinterest. He turns away.
That turning away is a quiet act of emotional dismissal. In that moment, she felt unheard. She felt dismissed during a positive bonding moment. The consequence isn't a big immediate fight, but that unrequited bid, it poisons the well. It fuels her latent irritation and negativity, which then comes roaring out later when they're discussing something logistical and otherwise trivial, like who's taking out the trash.
So it's death by 1,000 cuts.
It's the cumulative effect of consistently turning away from connection attempts. It fundamentally weakens the marital structure, guaranteeing the appearance of the four horsemen when conflict eventually arises.
So relationships don't fail with a massive explosion in an argument. They fail through the slow, quiet erosion caused by thousands of small moments of disconnection. And this is why the conversation about self-accountability is so critical, especially for the partners who might hold that demand role in the conflict, but whose contribution to the systemic failure actually happens much, much earlier in that non-conflict interaction.
It is. And we have to address the structural impediments that make that kind of self-accountability so difficult.
Exactly. That leads us directly into how these traditional gender roles and societal expectations create emotional blind spots for both men and women, hindering their ability to self-reflect effectively.
Let's get into those societal narratives, because they often provide the script that encourages us to externalize blame. That's the opposite of genuine self-reflection.
Right. So let's start with the burden that is so often placed on women.
We have to look at the historical burden of niceness, of deference. This has been systematically reinforced in women for centuries. Societal expectations have, implicitly or explicitly urged women to value humility, agreeableness, deference, and prioritizing the contentment of others.
And historically, this wasn't just about being a good person, was it? It was tactical.
It was absolutely a tactical necessity. These behaviors were tools for navigating a social and professional structure that was largely dominated by men. They ensured approval, and they reduced exposure to conflict or punishment.
So what looked like virtue was often a survival mechanism.
Exactly. But the modern consequence of that conditioning is that prioritizing courtesy and selflessness behaviors that often feel like the epitome of selfless love leads to profound personal disruption.
How so?
It necessitates suppressing personal ambitions, because pursuing them might disrupt the equilibrium of the relationship or the family. It creates immense difficulty in articulating needs decisively, and it inhibits the capacity to establish definitive boundaries. The partner whose job is always to smooth things over inevitably invests massive amounts of energy satisfying external desires while neglecting their own core aspirations.
And what's the inevitable emotional cost of that constant suppression? I can only imagine.
It generates a deep corrosive resentment and emotional fatigue. You start showing up in the relationship as a diminished, inauthentic version of yourself.
Right. You're not even there.
You're not. You're not capable of genuine connection because you are running on empty. And this quiet buildup of suppressed needs makes the eventual eruption, that demand we see in the demand withdrawal pattern, far more toxic and uncontrollable than if those needs had been articulated clearly and early on.
So it's the moment the nice girl persona collapses under the weight of her own decades of self-neglect.
And it often comes out as criticism toward the partner.
So the accountability mirror for women often reveals that their niceness wasn't actually healthy love, but a protective mask that inadvertently fueled the systemic dysfunction they were trying so hard to avoid. Now let's shift the perspective to the partner, who is often male in these dynamics, to understand why that husband withdrawal pattern even exists. Why is deep vulnerability such a liability for them?
The male experience operates under a completely different set of societal values. It's linked to utility and capability. Men are traditionally valued for being capable, reliable, and durable. Their social and professional worth is intrinsically tied to their perceived usefulness and productivity.
So any display of weakness threatens that core value.
It threatens everything. Consequently, displays of deep, uncontrolled vulnerability, the ugly crying, the crippling anxiety, the total emotional breakdown, are often perceived as catastrophic.
Catastrophic in what sense? Professionally? Socially?
Both. They're viewed as professional and social suicide. If a man appears incapable or unreliable because of emotional breakdown, his value as an asset in the social economy just plummets. And critically, the social support networks that society readily grants women for emotional vulnerability, they're largely absent for men.
So there's no safety net.
There's no safety net. Instead, genuine emotional distress is often met with shaming, abuse, mockery, or mint. And this is the most damaging part in a relationship context. Disgust.
Which brings us back to that chilling concept of the ick phenomenon that many men report fearing.
It's a powerful, powerful fear that drives the withdrawal. Many men worry that opening up about their deep pain, about their true emotional quantity, will lead to disgust and outright contempt from their partner.
That the person who is supposed to love them most will be repulsed by them.
Exactly. The fear is that the relationship will immediately wither and die, as if the man has revealed fundamental termites in the foundation. His partner signed on for stability and security, and his true pain reveals a perceived liability or weakness. And that causes love and admiration to convert rapidly into disgust and contempt.
That fear is powerful enough to mandate a change in behavior. So what's the coping mechanism that results from that?
They're forced into this exhausting position of having to perform fake vulnerability.
Perform it so it's not real.
It's not real. They craft a safe, controlled leakage of emotion, a small, acceptable dose of anxiety or stress that appears honest enough to satisfy the partner's request for him to open up. But they keep the true emotional quantity bottled up inside. This is incredibly stressful and burdensome, and it drives the man toward withdrawal and stonewalling, because maintaining this facade while suppressing his genuine distress is just unsustainable.
And there's a critique, isn't there, of the external pressure on men to be vulnerable that we need to acknowledge here.
Yes. The societal push for men to open up is often perceived as demanding vulnerability without addressing the very real risk of rejection or the ick factor, especially if that expressed pain sounds like an indictment of female failure.
Oh, you mean by that?
Well, if a man opens up and the underlying message is, I am drowning because I don't feel supported by you, many women recoil. It challenges their image of themselves as the nurturing, supportive partner, and it leads to defensiveness rather than connection.
So this complex interplay, women suppressing needs until they demand, and men suppressing pain until they withdraw, is the perfect illustration of how these gendered societal scripts fuel the systemic breakdown of a relationship. This complexity highlights why the journey to self-accountability is so painful, especially when that system, the marriage, finally collapses.
It forces the individual, when all the external systems fail, to finally look inward. And that transition is complex, it's lengthy, and it is profoundly disruptive.
Divorce is a massive trauma. I think people underestimate that. It's not a quick event. It's a profound process, particularly when it drags on for 6 months or more and involves high levels of conflict. What's the immediate psychological impact?
The immediate phase is marked by what researchers call temporal self-disruption.
Temporal self-disruption.
It's the initial shock of realizing that everything is falling apart. It's the feeling that all dreams are collapsing, especially that sacred dream of a union intended to last till death sets us apart. The person literally loses their projected future self.
And the loss isn't just existential, it's highly practical and tied to your identity.
Absolutely. Divorcees experience profound losses of self and role. This includes the loss of their spousal role, the emotional connection, the codependence, the person they were in relation to their partner, and their parental role. They lose the clarity of being a traditional parent, especially if court orders restrict interaction with their children. And this role loss leads to acute feelings of shame, doubt, and overwhelming loneliness. Their entire identity feels shattered into fragments.
And the legal environment often just compounds the psychological distress, particularly when the process is slow.
Oh, absolutely. When the legal process drags on for years, individuals enter a state of restricted self-transition. They feel constrained by profound uncertainty and the binding legal status feeling, still formally a married woman, or hung in the process. Psychologically, this is known as role relational ambiguity. The self is unclear because the situation is unfinalized.
You're in limbo.
You are perpetually stuck, unable to fully mourn or plan the next stage of life.
And adding to that internal uncertainty is the external hostility. This section of the research is particularly stark, I thought.
It's a dark reality for many. Participants in these studies often describe enduring externally derived attacks, viewing the entire situation as fighting in a war. They feel actively manipulated, put down, and blamed, not just by their former spouse, but sometimes even by legal advisors or institutional systems. They report feeling profoundly humiliated and helpless within institutional processes like courts or social services.
So they feel victimized by the very system that's designed to help them transition.
They see themselves as forgotten pieces in a self-moving machine that just operates without any regard for their human needs. One participant reported feeling like some kind of a social or a criminal caught committing some kind of terrible crime simply because they initiated or were forced through the divorce process.
That hostile environment must force them to build some intense internal psychological defenses.
It does. And that external pressure forces an intense focus on internal self-protection. But this is also where the true moment of accountability can spark the profound change we've been looking for.
Okay, so how does that happen?
Well, divorcees immediately employ 3 major strategies to protect, preserve, and promote the self. The first 2 are really external coping mechanisms. They focus on staying strong and truthful, finding strength in their professional life, or justifying the difficult decision to divorce, which counters that pervasive myth that only weak people divorce. They also engage in counteracting the blame, proving that the external world's negative depiction of them is false, often by seeking external validation from therapists or attorneys.
This sounds like necessary self-defense, but not necessarily growth. Where does the growth begin?
The growth begins during the third strategy, which is reconstructing the past. This is the moment they look back and try to make sense of what happened. Initially, this reconstruction has a very external focus, seeing oneself in a relationship with someone who was unable to appreciate their investment, regretting time spent, feeling treated like a maid or a tool. This stage is focused on victimhood.
But the true painful pivot, the accountability mirror moment, is when that focus turns inward.
The internal focus is the crux of accountability. And it is terribly painful. It involves recognizing and accepting your direct personal involvement in maintaining the relationship's dysfunctional structure. The shock comes from realizing I wasn't just a victim. I enabled this structure through my own passivity, my own codependence, or my own fear of confrontation.
That realization, understanding that the red flag was me, was a deep psychological truth, not just a metaphor. That must be devastating.
It comes with terribly painful suffering and shock, because it challenges the fundamental identity they had held for years. It means taking ownership of the passive behavior or the failure to set boundaries or the codependence. And this difficult acceptance then leads to the final coping strategy, which is accepting the ongoing.
What does that mean?
It means letting go of what cannot be changed, or allowing the long, messy legal process to simply go parallel to everyday life without consuming all their mental energy.
That transition from external blame to that painful internal focus, that's the engine of self-improvement. It forces you to stop asking, what did he do? And permanently shift the question to, what was my contribution to the system's failure, and how can I fix my behavior going forward, regardless of my partner?
Exactly. And this requires practical application. We've moved from theory into necessary action.
Okay, let's transition into those practical strategies for cultivating accountability. Because if we accept that the small daily interactions set the stage for conflict, then accountability has to be practiced every single day. We need mirrors for our daily conduct.
We can structure this around a set of daily self-accountability questions. These are designed to address those mundane moments that build connection. First one, did I actively listen to my partner's thoughts, feelings, and concerns today? This directly counters that turning away pattern we talked about. Listening is not just hearing words, it's confirming engagement and validation.
It's a simple acknowledgement. You don't even have to agree, just engage.
That's it. Next, did I express appreciation and gratitude for my partner's contributions? The emotional bank account needs consistent deposits. Gratitude is the easiest deposit you can possibly make.
Right. And what about boundaries?
Did I respect my partner's boundaries and personal space? This ensures you are not making the other person feel overwhelmed or constantly required to perform emotional labor for you.
And reversing that, did I communicate openly and honestly about my own feelings and needs? This directly counters that female tendency to suppress needs that we discussed earlier. It prevents the buildup of resentment.
And crucially, did I take responsibility for my actions, especially my mistakes? If you're quick to apologize for small errors, you're practicing the antidote to defensiveness.
And the last one is about balance.
Yes. Did I contribute to a balanced give-and-take dynamic in the relationship? This addresses the codependence and that feeling of being a maid or a tool. If you're constantly overgiving, you're contributing to an unbalanced system that ultimately will fail.
Those are the daily check-ins. Now let's consider accountability during and immediately after conflict. The heat of the moment is where all the psychological pressure explodes. How do we hold ourselves accountable under that kind of duress?
During and after conflict, self-accountability shifts to assessing your behavior under fire. First, did I express my thoughts and feelings in a respectful and non-blaming manner, avoiding the trap of criticism? You have to focus on specific behavior, not character. Use I statements instead of you statements.
I feel hurt when this happens, not you are a hurtful person.
Exactly. Next, did I take responsibility for my role in the argument, including any hurtful words or actions, even if they were provoked? Acknowledging your own part is the fastest way to de-escalate defensiveness in your partner.
And the mental frame is critical here, I would imagine.
It's everything. Did I prioritize finding a solution and understanding rather than trying to win the argument? This requires seeing your partner not as an adversary, but as a teammate you're collaborating with to solve a shared problem.
That is a huge shift from the adversarial mindset that leads to the Four Horsemen.
It is. Also ask yourself, did I remain open to the possibility that I may have misunderstood or misinterpreted my partner's intentions? Arguments so often rest on assumptions. Accountability requires you to check those assumptions.
And finally, when the dust has settled,
did I offer a sincere apology if I was in the wrong? And a sincere apology means acknowledging the impact of your behavior, not just justifying your intent.
If you're checking yourself on defensiveness and contempt using these questions, you're actively countering that whole cycle of negativity. Now, for the individual who has realized their own role in the collapse, especially women moving away from that niceness burden, the next phase is about redefining power.
Yes, it's about using self-accountability to build a stronger self. True empowerment is achieved when you are in harmony with your authentic self. When you express your desires boldly and without regret, abandoning that compliant archetype.
We need concrete strategies for the shift from compliance to assertiveness. What does that look like in practice?
We can call the first step tactical self-care. This means consciously refusing task overload to protect your mental health, even if that risks disappointing someone else.
Ooh, That's a hard one.
It's a direct counter to centuries of conditioning to prioritize others' needs. A very concrete step is dedicating a daily power hour to activities that enhance your well-being: exercise, reading, meditation, a hobby. This act signals to both yourself and the relationship that your well-being is non-negotiable. It establishes a personal boundary around your time.
It's the difference between doing self-care when you have time versus making time for self-care because it is foundational.
That's it exactly. Another critical element is proactive boundary setting. Instead of waiting for resentment to build up and then demanding change in a fight, you assert your needs up front. A great exercise is to create a boundary blueprint. List the specific areas needing clearer limits: work, family, social interactions, and define precisely how you will communicate and enforce them. This proactive, confident approach builds confidence in advocating for your personal interests and prevents that systemic failure of suppressed needs.
And this also extends to larger life goals, which we can frame as assertiveness and growth.
Absolutely. This means pursuing a fulfilling profession or passion that aligns with your core values, even if it challenges traditional expectations of what a woman should be doing. And most fundamentally, it means recognizing your inherent right to pursue your interests, to seek out things that make you happy, and to reject demands or expectations that compromise your integrity. This converts power from a display of obedience into a driving force for personal growth and capability fulfillment.
The ultimate payoff of all this painful self-reflection, of realizing where you were the red flag, of doing the hard work of setting boundaries, is not just having a better future relationship, it's achieving profound post-traumatic growth, or PTG. This is the psychological framework that allows struggle to transform you fundamentally.
This is a powerful concept that really summarizes the entire journey. Post-traumatic growth is defined as positive psychological change experienced as a result of struggling with highly challenging, stressful life circumstances. Circumstances that significantly challenge an individual's fundamental understanding of the world. And divorce and relationship breakdown certainly qualify.
And it is so vital to distinguish PTG from mere resilience. People often conflate them.
They do, but they're very different. Resilience is successfully recovering back to the previous level of functioning you had before the trauma. It's bouncing back.
Getting back to baseline.
Getting back to baseline. PTG is thriving. It goes above and beyond that baseline. And growth doesn't occur as a direct result of the trauma itself, but from the individual's struggle with the new reality in the aftermath. And it's crucial to understand that PTG often coexists with negative trauma-related outcomes, like distress or lingering pain. Growth does not erase the loss. It simply means something new and strong was built in the ruins.
So if someone goes through this massive disruption and manages to achieve growth, what does this change actually look like in their day-to-day life? What are the key areas that fundamentally transform?
Researchers identify 5 core measurable domains of post-traumatic growth. The first is appreciation of life. Individuals who achieve PTG often report dramatically changed priorities. They gain a heightened appreciation of the value of their own life and of each day. They focus on presence rather than chasing arbitrary external goals. They realize how fragile life is and become grateful for simple existence.
So they're letting go of all the trivial worries that used to dominate their mental space.
Exactly. The second domain is relating to others. This includes increased closeness with supportive others, greater compassion for themselves and for others facing difficulties, and critically, an increased willingness to express emotions to others. Having realized the cost of suppressing their needs, they learn to connect more authentically.
The third is personal strength.
Yes, personal strength. This is the discovery of an inner reserve they didn't know they possessed. It's a greater feeling of self-reliance, an increased ability to handle difficulties, and improved acceptance of life outcomes. They move from feeling helpless in that self-moving machine of divorce to realizing they are capable of navigating extreme stress.
That sounds like true empowerment, a concrete sense of capability that was forged in the fire.
It is. Fourth is new possibilities. This manifests as developing new interests, establishing a new path in life, or pursuing opportunities that were not previously considered possible within the confines of the old relationship. This might mean going back to school, changing careers, or moving across the country.
And the fifth domain is spiritual or existential.
Right. Spiritual, existential, or philosophical change. This involves finding deeper meaning and purpose, maybe developing a stronger faith, or just achieving a better philosophical understanding of life's unpredictable nature. They integrate the suffering into a coherent, meaningful life narrative.
These 5 domains show that the painful self-disruption experienced during the divorce is directly mapped onto a profoundly reconstructed and ultimately improved self. But how do we actively foster this growth? It sounds like it's more than just passive healing over time.
It requires intense, conscious, cognitive engagement. One key technique is rumination, but specifically deliberate rumination.
What's the difference?
Intrusive rumination,
Yeah.
that's the anxious, unproductive loop of why me, why did this happen, is damaging. But deliberate rumination means investing mental resources in actively seeking meaning reconstruction. You ask focused, investigative questions. Why did I stay? How did my behavior enable this? What must I change now?
So you're turning the anxiety loop into a focused, self-investigative process aimed at integration.
Precisely. Another critical factor is acceptance coping. The ability to accept situations that cannot be changed is a significant predictor of PTG. Coming to terms with reality, letting go of the need for control over external factors like the legal process or your ex-partner's behavior, that's crucial. This aligns perfectly with the divorcee's final coping strategy of accepting the ongoing. You stop fighting the past and accept the present reality, which frees up energy for building the future.
And finally, I assume personality and external support play a massive role in leveraging struggle into growth.
They do. Individuals with certain personality traits are better equipped to extract growth from struggle. Traits like openness, the willingness to reconsider fundamental beliefs, are essential for absorbing new realities. Agreeableness helps in seeking and accepting the social support needed during distress. Conscientiousness provides the self-regulating and problem-solving skills necessary to navigate the complexities of divorce. High levels of social support are also crucial, as supportive people help the individual craft new narratives about the changes that have occurred and integrate those new perspectives into a stronger life schema. The scientific data really confirms what the hardest personal lessons teach us. Relationship distress is fundamentally systemic, meaning both partners contribute to the collapse. The societal scripts we discussed, the gendered expectations that hinder genuine, open communication and force women into niceness and men into emotional withdrawal, are major systemic accelerants of that failure. However, the period post-dissolution offers a painful, unique, and powerful opportunity. Admitting where the red flag was us fuels a profound self-transition, allowing individuals to move beyond mere recovery to achieving a greater, more authentic, and ultimately more valued self.
This deep dive really shows that the capacity to critically analyze your own contributions, even in the most painful of endings, is the ultimate act of self-empowerment. That painful break, viewed through the lens of accountability and acceptance, becomes not just a loss you endured, but a transformative engine for profound personal growth, leading to a level of strength that far exceeds mere resilience.